last week, we've already checked about the so-called COLA, the CPI-based COLA program. Alright, so what is COLA? COLA means something, COLA actually stands for Cost of Living Adjustment, which we call COLA. And now, let me show you two cases in analysis. So on the slide, it is one of these two. So initially, we have a budget line and an optimal solution here with a indifference curve. and what happened here? So the case on the slide is like this one. Now MRT defined as P1 over P2 is a relative prices. So when MRT goes down, which means P1 becomes relatively cheaper than P2. Alright, so like for example, if P1 initially is 20 and P2 is 5, and if P1 increases by 5 to 25 and P2 increases also by 5 to 10, so the ratio is 4 and the ratio is 2.5. You see what? Both prices goes up, but relatively P1 becomes cheaper, relatively. Okay? So initially P1 is 4 times of P2, but now it's 2.5 times. Alright, so in this case, of course, if P1, for example, dropped from 20 to 15, and P2 increases to 10, so it's another case. But in this case, P1 drops and P2 increases. But this is not the only one case. We don't care about how precisely P1 or P2 changes. What we care about is the relative prices. Okay? So MRT describes the relative prices. Now the relative prices drops, which means the slope of the budget line becomes flatter, becomes smaller, and the curve and the line, the straight line, becomes flatter, right? With a smaller MRT. So now we see a flatter budget line. But another requirements we want to do for a COLA, for a cost of living adjustment, the CPI-based COLA. So we want to compensate the consumer so that he or she can afford to buy the first year's bundle. So the first year bundle, this is the first year bundle, this is the first year bundle, and after the adjustment, we want him or her afford to buy bundle. So the new budget line, would be like this, okay? With a smaller MRT. But with a larger MRT or bigger MRT, the case would look like this. So the reason why the new budget line got to pass through the initial consumption bundle is because we require this adjustment can make the consumer afford to buy the original bundle. Okay, so what does it mean by budget line so that one may afford? For each budget line, all bundles within the triangle area means we can afford that bundle, right? And for bundles fall outside of the range, which means we cannot afford it. Okay? So using up all money of the income, and we can still afford to buy that thing, which means it's on the budget line. It's on the budget line. So on the budget line, for bundles on the budget line, we can afford to buy it, and there's nothing, no money left. Okay? We used up all the money. So this would be the new budget line, or this is the new budget line. Either this one or this one. You will see, if you are the consumer, now your budget line becomes this one. What would you do? Would you stay at this point, or would you like to seek another one so that that one can provide us a better utility level? Yeah, we will seek another one, right? Like this. And in this case, we like to consume at this new point. The new one must be better. This one must make us better off than the original one. And this one can provide us a higher utility level than the original one. So no matter in this case or in this case, no matter which direction, in which direction the MRT changes, the consumer, after the adjustment, must be better off.
So why the new budget line just cross over the original bundles to prove that the original one is still affordable?
Because the first year's bundle, or the original bundle, just fall on the new budget line, which means we can afford it. Is that clear? So, the conclusion here can be applied to each case. Better off in the second year because the CPI-based quota overcompensated in the sense that utility increases. So, overcompensated as well. So what kind of adjustment, if we don't use this as the requirement or as the standard to compensate? Once again, if we use this as the standard, one of you can afford to buy the initial consumption bundle. This is a standard. How to compensate a consumer. This is a standard. But this kind of standard always in each case, okay? Always overcompensate. So how come or how can we find somewhere or some amount that we compensate the consumer and he or she remain remain the well-being as before. After the adjustment or after the change of the price, the relative price, if we use the utility level as the standard, so we compensate the consumer or the household. We compensate him or her that he or she may remain at the same level as before, at the same level of happiness, at the same level of well-being as before. So we need to use the indifference curve, the initial indifference curve, as the standard rather than the bundle as the standard. Okay? So for the new one, actually, if we just compensate to this level is enough. So this one would give him or her some more money so that he or she can afford the bundle. But this would be overcompensated. Okay? If you do not want to compensate too much or too less, exactly the same utility level as he or she was, then you just compensate to this level is enough. Okay? Or to compensate to this level, then it's enough. So using this one or this one can make the consumer stay at the same utility level, at the same indifference curve. Okay, stay on the indifference curve, on the same indifference curve. So stay on the same indifference curve. But a little bit more money will make him or her better off. That is what we say overcompensated. Okay? But actually, this kind of compensation or this kind of compensation is a theoretical one. Is practically, in the real world, if you are the government, if you wanted to compensate the consumer with the CPI to adjust the living standard, it's impossible to capture the precise shape of the indifference curve, right? We actually cannot know anyone's indifference curve. Can you just describe your indifference curve? It's actually a theoretical thing, right? We know something that, okay, maybe your indifference curve is flatter than mine because you like, for example, if I prefer Q1 than you do, then my indifference curve must be steeper. So we just know it is steeper if I prefer Q1. However, if I prefer Q2, then the indifference curve would be flatter, right? This is the only thing we know. Okay, this is the only thing we know, but we don't know the exact or the precise shape of the indifference curve. So that if I'm the government, I wanted to compensate you in this way. It is actually impossible because I cannot observe any real thing about the indifference curve. Okay? But I can observe what? I can observe what you consumed last year. I can observe what you consumed, what you have consumed last year. Right? It occurred in the last year, right? It's a real thing we may observe. So this is a way may overcompensate. However, this is the only way we may take. Otherwise, we don't know which standard should I or the government, should the government compensate the consumer. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Seems that the indifference curve is a thing that, theoretical thing that is hard to measure, so
It's impossible to measure, and also I cannot capture the exact shape. I know you like Q1, I know you like Q2, I know the more the better, I know these properties. However, I don't know the exact form of your indifference curves. Okay? But I may observe, actually I can, not only I may, I can observe what you consume, what you have consumed at some time before, right? So I may observe your consumption bundles. For example, yesterday, if you went to McDonald's to buy a meal, I can see, oh, okay, you just bought a Big Mac, and you bought a cup of Coke, and you bought a French fries, a big one. Okay, I know that. I may observe that. And today or tomorrow, I may compensate you so that you may offer or you may afford to buy the same bundle. Okay, so the consumption bundle is something we may observe practically, okay? So practically, we just use this as the standard to compensate. However, there's one important thing we need to know. That kind of compensation is actually too much. It's overcompensated. Okay? So if from 20 years ago there's someone, so in the very first year and the second year the government compensated him or her using this standard, by the COLA, CPI-based adjustment, the second year, the third year, and the 20th year, then you will see the consumer becomes better off, and better off than 20 years ago. For each year, he or she became better off. Okay, so either this case or this one. Any question about this? All right, we economists would not say, oh, you government should not compensate the consumer using this program or using this standard just because you may overcompensate. We would not say that because we know this is a practical thing. It's a practical policy we need to implement. So we want to run the policy practically, okay? But the only thing we need to know is that this kind of policy is actually overcompensate the consumer, okay? To help the consumer or not is one thing, but the other thing is that we need to know the exact effect of this kind of help, okay? We cannot just, okay, I help you. I already help you, so why you complain something to me, or you don't need, or you cannot complain. You know, someday if you are the governor, or if you were the mayor, the president, or some politician, And if there is someone just complain that you should not use CPI COLA, it's not enough. But actually you may argue, you just can make some statements or some conclusion, not conclusion, some inference. Using the logic, explain, actually this kind of policy has already overcompensated. So if you want to complain, you may complain, but you need to know what is the truth. What is the truth? Okay? Any question? Then let's go to chapter 5. Chapter 5. Consumer welfare and policy analysis. And the outline. 5.1, consumer welfare, expenditure function and consumer welfare, market consumer surplus, effect of government policy on consumer welfare, deriving labor supply curves. Okay, this is what we are going to study in chapter 5. Consumer welfare. So how much are consumers helped or harmed by shocks that affect the equilibrium price and quantity? So there is some external shock to the market, and the market price or quantity may be affected. Okay, so we'd like to know what kind of the shock, be it a typhoon, be it an earthquake, be it a policy, government policy. So any kind of, or some agreement with the US, with the Europe, or with Australia, or with China, any kind of agreement for trade, any change in the trade, in the agreement, either we open something more, or we just prohibit something to import or to export. So any kind of, this kind of shocks may affect the market price, the market quantity. We'd like to know as a consumer, or as all consumers as a whole, what would us be helped or be harmed? So we need a standard to check if the consumers are helped or harmed. Okay, so shocks may come from new inventions, that is another one, that reduce firm cost, or natural disasters, as I said, typhoon or earthquake, or government imposed taxes, government policies, subsidies, quotas. So is utility a natural measure of consumer welfare? We've already introduced in like chapter 2 or chapter 3 that the utility function, consumers consume the bundle of X and Y, so we got a utility, or we may use the utility to set as a specific value so that we may have a specific indifference curve, or we may have a group of indifference curves. Okay? So we use utility function to capture the indifference curves or preference. So do you think utility is a natural measure of consumer welfare? Actually, it's hard to tell how much you feel happy, how happy you are. We just say, okay, I'm happier than yesterday, or I'm less happy than yesterday. I feel bad, I feel good. Okay, that is the only thing we may say. But actually, utility function is something imaginary. We imagine there is a utility function so that we may analyze the behavior of consumers. So it's for an analytic purpose because we want to analyze consumers' behaviors so that we just construct something, we call it utility function. But actually, as I told you, utility function is an ordinal thing rather than a cardinal thing. Ordinal means the sequence is important, the order. So A is better than B, but the only thing I need to know is A is better than B. But how much A is better than B, we don't care. Okay? We don't care the size of the happiness. We just care about A is better than B. So it's an ordinal thing, order. We need to know the order. However, if we wanted to make something a major, utility is actually or obviously not enough. So we rarely know a consumer's utility function, right? It's hard to know someone's utility function. And utility does not allow for easy comparison across consumers. I know I'm happier than yesterday, but I don't know if I'm happier than you are. Okay? So it's hard to define, okay, I'm happier than you are. But I may say that, I feel better now than I was in the morning. So I may compare within myself, but across consumption, across people, it's hard to do that. So a better measure of consumer welfare is in terms of dollars. In terms of dollars. So there are many scholars outside for scholars not economists, for those non-economist scholars, they usually or they like to criticize you economists, just measure everything using dollars. Just like our life is measured by dollars. So it's just like money, money, money. Okay? You economists just talk about money, but actually it's not the case. It's because we do